We want to get your reaction to the capture of Saddam Hussein. The numbers are on the screen. 202 is the area code, 585-3880 for those of you who support the war. For those of you who don't, 585-3881, journal@cspan.org is the email. And we also have our international line open this morning for those of you who live outside the U.S., 202-585-3883. First call up, Durham, North Carolina. You're on the air.
Yes, good morning. I wish that you wouldn't have had to show the news conference again, because we're wasting good airtime for C-SPAN that we only have in this democracy that we're supposed to live in, to re-show a pat on the back for their
around the perimeter. By all accounts, U.S. forces, 600 of them, were able to move in completely unopposed. Saddam Hussein was captured. In fact, we can tell you he identified himself freely to interpreters and the U.S. military forces that captured him. He is indeed said to be in good condition, tired, thin, and dirty. When he was captured, he was wearing dark trousers, a white T-shirt, and a long-sleeve dark shirt. But again, the time frame is very interesting. Coalition forces assaulted this farmhouse area about 8 o'clock last night. Saturday night, they did not find him at the first two locations they went to. They kept looking because they knew from their intelligence tip that they really felt he would be there. They moved to another area very close by, found the sheep pen, the mud hut, the lean-to, the trap door, went down the hole, found Saddam Hussein. They started at 8 o'clock last night. We are told by 9:15, Saddam Hussein had been moved to a secure location. Wolf.
Very dramatic details. Barbara Starr, was anyone of importance with Saddam Hussein based on your reporting?
We have asked that question again. It has now been reported that 2 additional people were taken into custody, but to this hour, the U.S. military says they still do not have an identification on those people, perhaps an indication that they are not high-value targets, that they will have to determine who these people were.
All right, Barbara, please stand by. Ken Pollack is here, our CNN analyst from the Saban Center over at the Brookings Institution. As you listen to this dramatic retelling of what happened, the information Barbara Starr, other reporters, David Ensor, Jamie McIntyre, are gathering, Nick Robertson on the scene over there, what goes through your mind? You're a former analyst over at the CIA. This was actionable intelligence that apparently led to this capture.
Well, this is one of those situations where the entire intelligence process finally did work. Now look, this was a very hard target. Saddam was moving around quickly, he was moving around with the support of a lot of people. It was always a hard target. But what seems to have happened was you had both the collectors and the analysts working together to make this entire process work. People were being picked up, analysts were figuring out, okay, based on this information, let's try to target these other people. The collectors would go out, the soldiers would go out, they'd raid, they'd grab those people. That allowed them to move even closer in. It was a very nicely coordinated operation. It's the way intelligence should work, but it doesn't always.
All right, put on your analytical hat right now. How much of a blow is this to the Iraqi resistance, the insurgents who have been fighting the U.S. and its coalition partners?
Well, certainly it is something of a blow. Certainly there are a number of Iraqis who are doing this, who are fighting the U.S. purely because of Saddam Hussein and their ties to him. They're going to be demoralized. They're probably going to be disorganized. Many of the U.S. military personnel, intelligence personnel I spoke to out in Iraq believe that a lot of the attacks were being conducted by people being simply paid by Saddam. And if it's the case that those people can no longer be paid, a lot of that may go away as well. But we also need to keep in mind there are a number of people in Iraq who don't like us. In particular, Al-Qaeda is now there, and it looks like they've set up enough of an infrastructure to be able to carry out attacks of their own. The insurgency may not go away because you've got lots of Sunnis who don't like us there, because you've got Al-Qaeda, you've got other people, and in particular, Al-Qaeda and some of the other groups may decide to stage some spectacular events in the next few weeks as a way of showing that even though Saddam's gone, they're not.
As far as you're concerned, you don't believe the insurgency is necessarily the biggest problem facing the U.S. and its coalition partners, do you?
That's correct, Wolf. The insurgency is a problem for the U.S. forces, and I don't want to suggest that it is unimportant. But when you look at the grand scheme of things, what the U.S. is trying to do to build a new Iraqi society, which is absolutely critical to the stability of the Middle East and to U.S. vital interests, the insurgency itself is a rather small issue. Far more important are the fact that most Iraqis do not feel safe on their streets. They do not feel that the U.S. is providing them with the basic security and the basic services that they desperately need. That is the biggest question. And if the U.S. fails to provide that, reconstruction is never going to work.
All right, Ken, stand by. We're going to be continuing this analysis, obviously, here on CNN throughout the day. Aaron, it goes through my mind that what we are doing, you and me and all of our colleagues, is what journalism really is, the first draft of history. Eventually, books will be written about all of this with all of the details recounted from all the various perspectives, but we're beginning to get a lot of that information even in these early moments of what happened.
Just imagine for a moment the series of phone calls that went on, field phone calls from the leaders of that 600 soldier group that went into their commander saying, we think we got him. Phone calls from that commander to General Sanchez up the chain of command, to Paul Bremer, ultimately to Donald Rumsfeld, ultimately to the White House. That series of phone calls, that one piece of news, we got him. Those are the details that we can't wait to get. But the headline today could not be clearer. Saddam captured. Jane Arraf, our bureau chief in Baghdad, who has seen so much before and after in that troubled place, is with us this morning watching Iraqis celebrate and digesting what might, Jane, be a day that you could hardly have imagined a year ago.
Extraordinary, Aaron. In fact, of all the things that Iraqis would have had trouble imagining a year ago, that photograph must have been one of them. That video of Saddam Hussein, a man who, by the way, had been reported to have an absolute obsession with hygiene, having his hair checked for lice, having a U.S. military person stick a tongue depressor in his mouth. Absolutely extraordinary. There were gasps when that went up. There are still some celebrations in the street. And Aaron, we have with us the Baghdad police chief, the deputy minister of the interior, General Ahmed Ibrahim, who is perhaps one of the people representing the people who could be most affected by this. General Ahmed, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Please tell us, what did you think when you saw that picture of Saddam Hussein?
I am very, very happy, and all Iraqi people happy. All the children and the women and the old man, all women. All is happy, and they shoot in the air that the Iraqi way when they're happy. And Saddam said that all the Iraqi, they choose me. And now this is the answer. All the Iraqi, they hate that criminal. And I am one of them. I know she's Saddam, but Saddam said 100% chose me. And now that rabbit, now we see him in the TV, and he make the burn, he want discover, he want he go to the mountain to discover, but we follow them. We follow that criminal, Iraqi police and coalition forces, and I thank President Bush and Tony Blair and Mr. Bremer and anyone help Iraqi police and coalition forces, because the freedom returned back, and that freedom returned back, and the flag is still up and still now, and I want all the world, they see that flag. No, Allahu Akbar belongs to Saddam.
Does that mean you're going to have a new flag?
Yes.
This is going to be your new flag.
No, Allahu Akbar belongs to Saddam. That means Saddam is gone, and everything belonging to him is gone, and we follow that criminal, and his group maybe soon is all full down.
Now, you said Iraqi police were involved in this capture. What did the Iraqi police do to help catch Saddam?
Iraqi police, they have information, and the coalition forces also, they have information, and we work together 24 hours, not only to catch Saddam, to catch all the terrorists. We follow them.
Emerge in Iraq that has captured the fancy of all of these groups that have so far only been held together as the country of Iraq itself has been held together under the terrible tyranny of Saddam. One of the great fears that most observers have had, Shep, is that if indeed there wasn't a reason for these communities to act together, that the country would disintegrate in the way it was back in 1921, when there was no Iraq but just separate parts of different ethnic groups ruling parts of that desert. Perhaps the oil weapon will keep them together. That is, that they understand the importance of benefiting from the riches of that country. Perhaps the recognition that Iraqi nationalism is indeed as important, which is why it's important to give the Sunnis a role now in the future of the country.
What kind of immediate reaction would you expect to get from Iraq's closest neighbors? And would it be more of just a reaction, a verbal one, or might there be more substantive support here?
Indeed, that's an excellent question, Shepard. When you think about how the Iranian government and the mullahs have desperately wanted to see the United States fail, that they perhaps been involved, along with the remnants of the Ba'ath Party, in efforts to assassinate the moderate, to the extent there is moderate, Shiite leadership in Iraq. Watching very carefully here the triumvirate that leads the Shiite community, led by Ayatollah al-Sistani, and whether this accelerates efforts within the Shiite community to continue to have violence committed by young clerics against the establishment figures. On the other side of the border, looking at Syria, Syria has been, in effect, a major problem for the United States. It has provided financing to the Ba'ath Party dead-enders. It has permitted jihadists to cross the border. It has done very little cooperating. As you may know, this week the president himself authorized the implementation of sanctions against Syria because of Syria's continued efforts to deny the United States and coalition partners an opportunity to achieve what we need to do. Syria is a Ba'ath Party country led by a young dictator who seems to be prepared to have a confrontation with the United States. Perhaps the apprehension of Saddam will mean that he will recognize the enormous peril that he faces if he continues to thwart the United States.
The president has said repeatedly that it's always been his hope and certainly the goal that if we could get this situation stabilized, that the rest of the region, because of
that our troops are accomplishing their goal, that we're using the intelligence information appropriately and accurately. But the bottom line is, it is a great day for the Iraqi people. Okay. Gotta go.
And that was Bill Frist, Senate Majority Leader this morning. The numbers are on the screen, 202-585-3880 for those of you who support the war, 202-585-3881 for those of you opposed to it, and 202-585-3883 is our international line. We are also taking emails at journal@cspan.org. A couple of those. The capture of Hussein was predicted to be presented as a Christmas present. I don't know the crimes of which this man is guilty, but I do know that he will never get a fair trial under the Bush bunch. That's an unsigned email that we received. And another email that we received. First, God bless all the troops and their families. As I see it, the most important thing now is for the U.S. to allow the Iraqi people their due in deciding how to proceed with the captive Saddam Hussein. The worst thing the U.S. government could do right now is act in the arrogant way it has acted all along.
50 years ago. Ambassador, thank you. I want to get now to Bar Abed Mohammed, who is on the line with us now. 21 years in exile in London, has only returned to Baghdad since the fall of Saddam. Sir, your reaction to this morning's developments?
I beg your pardon. Can you repeat the question again, please?
I just basically wanted your reaction to what's happened today, and further maybe how much you think things on the ground physically will change in the days ahead as a result of such a thing.
Well, it is, seems to me like it's quite difficult to explain, actually. It's unbelievable. It's more difficult to say like a dream. I was expecting to see the end of Saddam Hussein like getting killed by someone or captured in a crossfire or get killed, not get captured so easy. And seemed to me like a different person on the TV when I first saw him.
We had all
at this moment is.
we had certainly all been led to believe that this is a man who said at least that he will go down fighting, he will die for the cause, he will die a martyr for the nation and the rest of it all. Two people with him at the time of this capture, and a Saddam Hussein sitting in the bottom of a hole with nothing. That's a pretty powerful statement for people like you and those who are still there who might like to be like you.
Yes. The first thing, the first impression for the people, that Saddam, that strong man, that unconfrontable person, it was nothing, just an empty lie, and he was hiding like behind some Islamic rules, not to suicide, not to kill himself. I'm glad he was not killed, not to turn into a symbol like a hero or something. He deserves what he is in today. I'm glad I had lived long enough to see the end of him.
How important is it in your mind, based on what you've seen since the fall of Saddam, how important is it that the Iraqi people be out in front of the process of punishing Saddam Hussein for what he's done?
Well, for me, it doesn't seem to me that it is quite important anymore for me to see the trial or not to see. Saddam's structure has completely destroyed today, and this dream of having Saddam or see or think that Saddam will come back to power one day is gone forever, and that would give the floor or prepare the ground for the first proper step to rebuild a new Iraq. I'm not interested to see his trial.
Of course, one of the biggest hopes right now, one of the biggest hopes of the world, certainly, of those within the coalition, definitely, is that this resistance will begin to fade away.
I don't think it should be rushed. Now, obviously, you know, there's Iraqi justice is going to want to be swift and a powerful sword, but I'd like to make sure that it's done more like what was done with Milosevic, and that every single thing is laid out there, so they have all the proof for the international community and the human rights groups of the tens of thousands of people killed. This catalog, so there's literally a graphic trial showing the extent of what he did, not merely in effect showing that he's justified for being executed or put in prison the rest of his life for a single act. Catalog it all, because that in turn gives a subconscious further justification in the Muslim world and the Arab world in particular for why we are there, even though we went in for weapons of mass destruction, among other things. So I think it's important it be done right, that is, by laying out in detail.
From the Democratic Party who perhaps could take the best shot at the nomination are Howard Dean, governor of Vermont, and General Wesley Clark. Howard Dean, of course, very much on the anti-war platform. He is the one who has been speaking out about this. Al Gore, when he endorsed Howard Dean last week, said the war in Iraq was a catastrophic mistake. Wesley Clark has also been highly critical of the president's prosecution of the war in Iraq and the fact that Saddam Hussein is still at large. This takes off the table a very big issue for President Bush. However, as I said earlier, this does not end the attacks. This does not end the insurgency. U.S. troops will still be in harm's way. The Iraqi people will still be in harm's way. And coalition troops will still be in harm's way. Paul Bremer and General Sanchez have said that they expect that the attacks against coalition forces in Iraq are going to increase as they head toward this transition of power scheduled for next June. So certainly that is still going to be a huge issue in terms of the Democratic campaign. But Dan, it can't be said strongly enough that this does take off the table what has been a huge bugaboo, a huge boogeyman for President Bush, and that line of attack obviously is going to cease. So for him, it's a good day politically, and as well, it's a good day for coalition forces in Iraq. And just should remind
intelligence, technological intelligence. What was it?
I can't tell you and be specific in terms of the briefing, but just let me say it was a better comprehensive analytical effort, which speaks well, I think, to our efforts to restore stability in Iraq. They deserve a lot of credit. And as Joe indicated, a million people murdered, buried alive in graves, and we're discovering the mass graves right now, not to mention the fact that he came to grips with his destiny without any firefight in regards to his two sons, and he is being extremely cooperative. I hope that that bears well in some of the questions we have in the inquiry that the intelligence community is now conducting. But it is a great day for America, and it's a better day for the Iraqis.
Let me show you the disguises that our intelligence community suggested that Saddam Hussein may be using. And sure enough, they suggested he would grow a beard. It was actually much fuller than the one you're seeing. And also this wanted poster. Remember, there was a $25 million ransom on this wanted man, no longer wanted, put an X through his face as well. Senator Roberts, do we have any information that someone may be claiming this $25 million?
I don't have any information on that, but you can, you're exactly right in regards to the characterization that you just shown on the TV set there. Here is a man who looked like a homeless person. Here's a man driving around in an orange and white taxi day to day to day to day to farm to farm to farm, not even the city of Tikrit where he was from. He had two people with him, and they just simply went into the darkness as the attack started. There was something suspicious about this area. You find an 8-foot spider hole, and in there's the spider. And he comes out with no real defiance, and he had two AK-47s, a pistol, and $750,000, and an orange and white taxi.
Let's go to Indianapolis, Indiana. We're joined by the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Richard Lugar. Senator Lugar, what does this event mean for American foreign policy vis-a-vis Iraq?
It's a great victory for the American people. It vindicates the confidence Americans have had in George Bush as our president, and Jerry Bremer, and General Sanchez and the troops there. It gives us confidence to continue, and that was very important. The whole purpose, at least of the Iraqi insurgency, was through killing Americans, to discourage this country, to try to get us literally to leave and to let the old regime come back, or at least the elements that are still alive. Now, in addition to that, it gives us momentum for Jim Baker to visit with other countries and say, listen, if Iraq is going to be a whole government, we've got to begin to forgive the debt, most of it, if not all of it. We have got to begin to think about how this country stays together, because it's not a foregone conclusion that Shiites, Sunnis, Arab tribes, Kurds are in fact going to come together, although they have a much better chance in this context. For all of these reasons, this is really a signal moment, and we ought to celebrate it, but we ought to take advantage of the momentum in our foreign policy to visit with every other country in the world.
Senator Lugar, the trial, do you believe the trial should be conducted by Iraqis in Baghdad?
Yes, I think that's a good idea, but I would add this thought. We had better make sure we have cleaned up the insurgency first. We better make sure that we are on the trail of a constitution-building process or an Iraqi council that has confidence of Iraqis. In essence, we had best make certain that the underpinnings of this situation are very clear and that progress toward a sound Iraqi government with international support. By this time, if we get the insurgency gone, the UN will come back in, the Red Cross will come back in, all sorts of countries will come back in. But until the insurgents are found, reasons not to have a public debate in their countries about the loss of troops, and ditto for the international organizations.
Finally, Senator Lugar, do you believe the capture of Saddam Hussein will lessen the insurgency or add fuel to it in the short term?
My guess is it will lessen the insurgency, but it will take a while for everybody to get the word. In other words, if you were a Sunni who had been enjoying political power, enjoying beating up on Shiites and your neighbors, you may not have got over that idea yet. And clearly the idea was that if we weaken the Americans and we weaken the friends of America who are there and they leave, then we've got a chance. And now they must understand they don't have a chance, but it may take a little while for that word to filter out.
Senator Lugar, thanks very much. July 22nd, 2003, Senator Roberts, Uday and Qusay were captured and killed. I believe we have pictures of them. And we were told that perhaps their capture and killing would lessen the resistance. It seemed to only have increased it. What do you think, what are you being told by the intelligence community will happen now? in light of the arrest, capture of Saddam Hussein? Will resistance increase or decrease?
I will tell you one thing, that our forces in the field are ready for any instant retaliation, but I agree with Senator Lugar over the long term. I think it will help. When I was in Iraq, and I've been there twice, even if you mentioned Saddam's name, there was palpable fear in the eyes of the person that you would be discussing. The whole issue with it. It wouldn't make any difference if it was somebody in charge of the infrastructure or military or the local police. Now that's gone. Now I think you've got two categories of people. You have the Baathists and the Sunnis who have to realize they're not going to come back in power. They're going to have to share power, and they're going to have to be part of stability. Then you have the foreign jihadists who have been encouraged to come. What they do is another question. But I agree with Senator Lugar, and I think probably Joe would agree with me, is that you have to establish the security before you can go ahead and try Saddam. I do think that the Iraqis should try him under the War Crimes Tribunal that has been agreed to. I think that's only fair and only right.
There could be a real security risk with a trial of Saddam Hussein, that the resistance would try to disrupt it or kill people or to sabotage it.
Yes, he could become a martyr in the eyes of those people, but he is being somewhat cooperative. It's going to be very interesting to me what he says in regards to what my committee is taking a look at, and that's the issue of the WMD and the ties to terrorists in that country prior to the war.
Let's go to David Gregory at the White House. I understand he has an announcement to share with us. David?
Tim, the president will speak to the nation at 12 noon Eastern Time from the Cabinet Room here at the White House. That's according to his spokesman, Scott McClellan, who says the president has been following events all morning long, was particularly moved, he said, by the outburst of applause during the press conference earlier today when the announcement was made that Saddam Hussein was captured. McClellan saying that the president believes this is a very good day for the Iraqi people. It's also a good day, Tim, for this administration, which has been getting a lot of criticism for the Iraq operation. This is a major milestone and a turning point, they believe. It's something that the president will talk about again, 12 noon Eastern Time from the Cabinet Room.
Thank you, David. Senator Lieberman, I know you don't want to talk about politics, but here's the President of the United States at noon addressing this country and this world, center stage, basically saying, I told you I was going to get him, and I got him. What does this do to the Democratic primary race in terms of Howard Dean, who is vociferously anti-war, and someone like you who's been supportive of the president?
Well, I hope it says to my fellow Democrats, and I'm confident it will say, that if we expect to have a chance to take this country forward and gain the confidence of the American people to lead and change things for the better here at home, restore jobs, deal with the health care crisis, improve education and retirement security, we've got to have a candidate running who will convince the American people that as president, he will be strong. He will have a program to win the war on terrorism and to protect our security from tyranny. With all respect, this is now down to a choice between Howard Dean and me. And Howard Dean hardly talks about the war on terrorism. He hasn't put forward a plan for it. I put forward a full plan for investing what's necessary to stay strong, to capture and kill al-Qaeda and the terrorists, and then more broadly to win the larger battle for the hearts and minds of the Islamic world. The same is true for Homeland Security. I wrote the bill that created the Homeland Security
Security. So you think today's
Department.
events hurt the candidacy of Howard Dean?
Well, in my opinion, they should, because let me say it again. If Howard Dean had his way, today Saddam Hussein would still be in power, not in prison, and the world would be a much more dangerous place for the American people and a terrible place for the people of Iraq.
But the war has still a long way to go, and just as we ebb and flow with very good news, the situation in Iraq could turn bad in the days and months ahead.
This is true. This is what I said before, Tim. First off, the war against terrorism is a war against people who hate us more than they love life. So that war is going to go on. Those terrorists are there now fighting us, blowing up the United Nations, Red Cross, Shia Muslim mosques. They have to be stopped. And the world, the president has to regain some of the moral authority he's lost. I hope he can do it to get the rest of the world to come in and join us. This battle is not over. We need much more of a plan than this administration had the day after Saddam Hussein was overthrown. And we have to remember, the war on terrorism is going to go on for a while. The American people are not going to vote for somebody who they don't believe is going to be tough as nails against the terrorists. And that's my record. I may speak softly, but I carry a big stick, and I use it.
Let's go to Senator Joe Biden, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Biden, your reaction to the capture of Saddam Hussein and what this will mean for the war in Iraq.
Well, I think it's going to be very useful, obviously. The biggest thing, Tim, I think, is that we're going to end up with a circumstance where we're going to get a lot more cooperation in Iraq. And so the idea that these insurgents who are left and or the terrorists from out of the country are not going to have that pool to swim in as much, because it's a little like the drug dealers taken off the corner. Everyone was quiet. They weren't sure they was going to come back. Now it's clear he's captured. Now I think they're going to be ready to help. And so I think that's the biggest thing that's going to happen in the near term in Iraq on the ground.
Senator Biden, you have taken a position in the minority of the Democratic Party, urging the president to send more American troops into Iraq. One, do you still hold to that position? And two, how do you think this capture is going to affect the debate within the Democratic primary amongst the candidates running for president?
Well, I'd leave that to President Lieberman to make that decision. I don't know. I'm not in that primary. But in terms of my view, I really think that I call for more troops in Iraq because we weren't willing to try to get international forces in there, NATO in there. I've been calling for NATO, as you know, as well, Tim. I just got back from Brussels last week, bracketed by the Secretary of Defense and Secretary of
in Iraq's history. For decades, hundreds of thousands of you suffered at the hands of this cruel man. For decades, Saddam Hussein divided you citizens against each other. For decades, he threatened and attacked your neighbors. Those days are over forever. Now it is time to look to the future, to your future of hope, to a future of reconciliation. Iraq's future, your future, has never been more full of hope. The tyrant is a prisoner. The economy is moving forward. You have before you the prospect of a sovereign government in a few months. With the arrest of Saddam Hussein, there is a new opportunity for the members of the former regime, whether military or civilian, to end their bitter opposition. Let them now come forward in a spirit of reconciliation and hope, lay down their arms, and join you, their fellow citizens, in the task of building the new Iraq. Now is the time for all Iraqis, Arabs and Kurds, Sunnis, Shia, Christian, and Turkoman, to build a prosperous, democratic Iraq at peace with itself and with its neighbors. Dr. Pachachi.
يشرفني. So far, still, we say that this was not correct, although this, and if that was not the case, that was why journalists were barred. Even in the future, when we be removed from the event, from the happening, we ask, as journalists from the Governing Council and the American troops, that there should be a grouping of journalists, just like you went and looked at that ugly criminal. We want to go and see so that we can confirm to the Iraqi people, because the Iraqi people are in doubt. Some of them are starting to ask questions. Not all of Iraqis, but some few that are affecting or influencing the others. Thank you. فائزة عزي, حياة LBC. Now the issue has been settled. The members of the governing councils, council members and other Iraqis and the coalition forces were hoping is settled. What is the status after Saddam Hussein? The security portfolio is still up in the air. There are many incidents on the street, the fuel shortage, the many issues that are relevant to the Iraqis. What about that? What is it after the arrest of Saddam Hussein? I met with many Iraqis on the street. They said Saddam Hussein is an era that already passed. Whether he is arrested or not, it's enough that his rule is finished. What is it after this phase? Iraq is exiting from the war. Iraq is actually exiting from a war, and a war as major military operations finished in May. The country is destroyed. The infrastructure was destroyed by Saddam that was arrested today. We accomplished a great deal of improvement vis-a-vis, or when you look at to countries that are out of a war. What has happened in Iraq in a few months is more than what happened in many years in Iraq, in Germany and other countries that exited from a war. However, we are working to solve the problems. We're working to solve the security problem. We always say that security will not be restored unless and until the Iraqis themselves are responsible for securing their country. Also, the fuel issue, this will be resolved, and the Governing Council is going to take a series of procedures and steps. We already discussed that in the Governing Council. We are going to take steps to solve the issue of the fuel shortage. After Saddam, the tyrant, was arrested, and this is a request. Have you decided on the trial? Yes, there will be a public hearing, a trial that is open. And Dr. Muwaffaq may be interested in adding something. In the name of God, the most merciful. My brothers and sisters, let me tell you, in actuality, the Iraqi people are well deserving of this glad tiding and victory of today. On behalf of myself and my colleagues, I congratulate the Iraqi people of this great victory that was accomplished today. As for whether there will be any doubt, as the head of the council just said, there should be no doubt, because we saw him, we talked to him, and there was a discussion with four of the Governing Council members. Those who doubt us in many other issues continue to doubt us, but believe us in this. Saddam Hussein is under arrest, in secure hands, and he will be presented to trial. And the court that was enacted by a law by the Governing Councils recently is a criminal court that is specialized in the crimes against the Iraqi people. This court, hopefully, God willing, will be public and open, and will be open to the press, so that the people in Iraq will see the nature of the crimes that this regime had committed with Saddam Hussein at the helm.
The capture of Saddam Hussein is a defining moment in the new Iraq.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
A few days ago, we announced the formation of the criminal court that is specialized in the crimes against humanity, and we took extra care in the law that enacted that court that this will be a civil court. The procedures will be normal and will be open public hearing court. This is guaranteed by the Iraqi law. The sessions will be open and public, and the defendant can appoint a lawyer, and if he cannot do that, the court will appoint a lawyer on his behalf. Also, there will be an appeal committee to study the appeals. This court is not a final verdict court. Also, we are determined to show the world as a whole the bright face of democracy and freedom that is newly forming in Iraq, and that also includes a civil trial that is just to those that caused hundreds of thousands of victims of the Iraqi people. This will not be a vindictive or revengive a trial for revenge. This is a just trial.
عدنان العبد من تلفزيون الحرية الاتحاد الوطني الكردستاني. سيادة الرئيس مبروك للشعب العراقي بداية.
Congratulations first, Mr. President. I have a question. There is a saying that the Peshmerga, the Kurdish troops were very cooperative and they pointed to the hideout of Saddam Hussein. Is that true or not? Mr. Khosrat Rasool had a role in disclosing or finding out the hideout of Saddam yesterday, and he participated, and a group of the Union troops participated in the gathering of this information, but the actual operation of the arrest was fully executed by the American Special Forces and the 4th Infantry Division of the United States troops. Please state your name and who you're representing, and then the question. When you met the deposed leader Saddam Hussein, did he express any apology, or have you felt any of that apology or remorse? One question, please. In relation to the trial of the criminals of war, is that going to be an international? Shouldn't there be an international also court that looks into these crimes, because there's some international dimensions to them? War crimes. Thank you. Let's. The specialty of the jurisdiction of that court is the crimes against humanity and war crimes. The jurisdiction of the court, as it was enacted, it was spelled out what the jurisdiction is, and according to that, those will be tried according to that jurisdiction. He was not apologetic. He was sarcastic and making mockery of the Iraqi people. We asked him, why you killed As-Sadr? He said, and we said, don't you see that the people now are happy? They said, these are mobs. When we asked about the people that he killed collectively in groups, he said they were thieves. We asked about certain names, as if this were like my property. Why are you asking about them? He was determined and insistent on his crimes, same way that he used to do it before. We didn't go there to be vindictive. We are people of politics. We just tell you the information as it is. We had a responsibility to go to see how the status he's in and to see his mental situation. That's the main reason we went there.
Well, we don't know where is the money now. I imagine it was taken away from him.
Should we go to Iraq?
He seemed to be was rather tired and haggard, but as my colleague Dr. Abdul said, he was unrepentant. He was unrepentant and sometimes almost defiant.
Please use the microphone so that they can translate.
As far as the money is
Yes,
concerned, he seemed to be unrepentant and even defiant sometimes. And he tried to justify his crime one way or another, saying that he was a just but firm ruler. Our answer was he was an unjust ruler because his crime covered thousands of people. But he was obviously tired, but unrepentant and defiant. About half an hour.
Excuse me, apparently 2 microphones are open. Can you repeat this?
All right, we're clearly having a little difficulty hearing what's going on.
Leading the country. I think we have the audio cleared up. Let's listen.
Can you hear me now? Well, I was asked what happened to the money. $750,000 were found on him. I have no idea what happened to the money, but certainly it was taken away from him. We found him obviously tired and haggard, but he was unrepentant and even defiant. He tried to justify his crimes, saying that he was a just but firm ruler. Of course, our answer was that he was an unjust ruler, responsible for the death of thousands of people.
الحقيقة يعني الرجل
Actually, the man,
صحيح يعني متعب
he was
يعني متعب نفسيا أو متعب جسديا
tired, physically tired and mentally tired, but we did not feel at any moment that he was apologizing to the Iraqi people or he had remorse for the crimes that he committed. And like Mr. Adel said, when we asked him, why did you kill Sadr al-Awwal and al-Sadr al-Thani and al-Hakim, he was sarcastic. He said, they are not Sadr, they are foot. That is totally sarcasm. When we talked about Halabja and the mass graves, he said, these graves, did you ask the relatives of these people, did you ask their family if whether they were terrorists, whether they were deserters, whether they were thieves? Asked him, we told them if we were in your place and you were in your place, if we give you to the Iraqi people, they could do horrible things to you. He said that the Iraqi people are just a bunch of hoodlums. He is a horrible criminal. There was no remorse for any crime he committed against the Iraqi people, the wars against Iran, not even about the Kuwaiti. He actually justified the Kuwait Halabja and Iran. He is sick. I think he is sick. You don't believe it. It's beyond belief how sick this person is. I think there has to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist to examine him and check what kind of a paranoia he has. Let's go back to the issue of the $750,000 that was found on him.
Give him a chance. This is a free country, you know.
لا عبر الميكروفون حتى تسمع بالترجمة أيضا.
نهنيكم على هذا اليوم العظيم على قائد من الشرطة العراقية. نهنيكم على هذا اليوم العظيم. موضوع 750,000 دولار التي وجدت مع صدام هي مبلغ قليل من الأموال الكثيرة الطائلة التي نهبها من الشعب العراقي.
The $750,000 is actually an insignificant amount considering the money that was taken from the Iraqi people.
هذه الملاحقة مستمرة في الحقيقة يعني احنا باتصال
The follow-up, we're still following up. We are still in contact with a lot of countries to try to find these the monies that they are taken and trying to retrieve it or get it back.
بس بدون شعر هالمرة.
After arresting the former president, do you expect that there will be a change in the timeline of turning over sovereignty to the Iraqis? I don't think it will be. It will not be postponed. It will not be delayed. Actually, I think it will be earlier. Definitely, it will not be later than June next year.
هذا دعاء لا يستجاب.
خلود الزيادي من جريدتي ابن البلد والأخبار. عندما ألقي القبض على صدام
When Saddam Hussein was arrested, was there any military leaders or any politicians with him? There were 2 guards. He had rifles in this hole, but he did not use it. There was not one bullet fired.
لعله من المناسب إذا يسمح لي السيد الرئيس. لعله من المناسب أنه يوصف أنه كيف وجد.
I think we need to tell you where he was found. He was found in a hole like 8 feet deep, and the hole just could take one person. It's as narrow as this, and through this hole in the side there's another hole. He was living with rats, actually.